Pretty Good Privacy is a data encryption and decryption computer program that provides cryptographic privacy and authentication for data communication. PGP is often used for signing, encrypting, and decrypting texts, emails, files, directories, and whole disk partitions, and to increase the security of email communications. It was created by Phil Zimmermann in 1991. PGP and similar software follow the Open PGP standard for encrypting and decrypting data. Design. PGP encryption uses a serial combination of hashing, data compression, symmetric key cryptography, and finally public key cryptography. Each step uses one of several supported algorithms. Each public key is bound to a username in, or an email address. The first version of this system was generally known as a web of trust, to contrast with the X509 system, which uses a hierarchical approach based on certificate authority and which was added to PGP implementations later. Current versions of PGP encryption include both options through an automated key management server. Compatibility. As PGP evolves, versions that support newer features and algorithms are able to create encrypted messages that older PGP systems cannot decrypt, even with a valid private key. Therefore, it is essential that partners in PGP communication understand each other's capabilities or at least agree on PGP settings. Confidentiality. PGP can be used to send messages confidentially. For this, PGP combines symmetric key encryption and public key encryption. The message is encrypted using a symmetric encryption algorithm, which requires a symmetric key. Each symmetric key is used only once and is also called a session key. The message and its session key are sent to the receiver. The session key must be sent to the receiver so they know how to decrypt the message, but to protect it during transmission, it is encrypted with the receiver's public key. Only the private key belonging to the receiver can decrypt the session key. Digital signatures. PGP supports message authentication and integrity checking. The latter is used to detect whether a message has been altered since it was completed, and the former to determine whether it was actually sent by the person or entity claimed to be the sender. Because the content is encrypted, any changes in the message will result in failure of the decryption with the appropriate key. The sender uses PGP to create a digital signature for the message with either the RSA or DSA algorithms. To do so, PGP computes a hash from the plain text and then creates the digital signature from that hash using the sender's private key. Web of trust. Both when encrypting messages and when verifying signatures, it is critical that the public key used to send messages to someone or some entity actually does belong to the intended recipient. Simply downloading a public key from somewhere is not an overwhelming assurance of that association. Deliberate impersonation is possible. From its first version, PGP has always included provisions for distributing users' public keys in an identity certificate, which is also constructed cryptographically so that any tampering is readily detectable. However, merely making a certificate which is impossible to modify without being detected is insufficient. This can prevent corruption only after the certificate has been created, not before. Users must also ensure by some means that the public key in a certificate actually does belong to the person or entity claiming it. From its first release, PGP products have included an internal certificate vetting scheme to assist with this. A trust model, which has been called a web of trust. A given public key may be digitally signed by a third-party user to attest to the association between someone and the key. There are several levels of confidence which can be included in such signatures. Although many programs read and write this information, few include this level of certification when calculating whether to trust a key. The Web of Trust protocol was first described by Zimmermann in 1992, in the Manual for PGP version 2.0. As time goes on, you will accumulate keys from other people that you may want to designate as trusted introducers. Everyone else will each choose their own trusted introducers, and everyone will gradually accumulate and distribute with their key a collection of certifying signatures from other people, with the expectation that anyone receiving it will trust at least one or two of the signatures. This will cause the emergence of a decentralized, fault-tolerant web of confidence for all public keys. The web of trust mechanism has advantages over a centrally managed public key infrastructure scheme such as that used by S-MIME but has not been universally used. Users have been willing to accept certificates and check their validity manually or to simply accept them. No satisfactory solution has been found for the underlying problem. Certificates in the Open PGP specification. Trust signatures can be used to support creation of certificate authorities. A trust signature indicates both that the key belongs to its claimed owner and that the owner of the key is trustworthy to sign other keys at one level below their own. A level 0 signature is comparable to a web of trust signature since only the validity of the key is certified. A level 1 signature is similar to the trust one has in a certificate authority because a key signed to level 1 is able to issue an unlimited number of level 0 signatures. A level 2 signature is highly analogous to the trust assumption users must rely on whenever they use the default certificate authority list. It allows the owner of the key to make other keys certificate authorities. PGP versions have always included a way to cancel identity certificates. A lost or compromised private key will require this if communication security is to be retained by that user. This is, more or less, equivalent to the certificate revocation lists of centralized PKI schemes. Recent PGP versions have also supported certificate expiration dates. The problem of correctly identifying a public key as belonging to a particular user is not unique to PGP. All public key, private key crypto systems have the same problem, even if in slightly different guises, and no fully satisfactory solution is known. PGP's original scheme at least leaves the decision as to whether or not to use its endorsement vetting system to the user, while most other PKI schemes do not, requiring instead that every certificate attested to by a central certificate authority be accepted as correct. Security quality to the best of publicly available information. There is no known method which will allow a person or group to break PGP encryption by cryptographic or computational means. Indeed, in 1996, cryptographer Bruce Schneier characterized an early version as being the closest you are likely to get to military-grade encryption. Early versions of PGP have been found to have theoretical vulnerabilities, and so current versions are recommended. In addition to protecting data in transit over a network, PGP encryption can also be used to protect data in long-term data storage such as disk files. These long-term storage options are also known as data at rest, i.e., data stored, not in transit. The cryptographic security of PGP encryption depends on the assumption that the algorithms used are unbreakable by direct cryptanalysis with current equipment and techniques. In the original version, the RSA algorithm was used to encrypt session keys. RSA's security depends upon the one-way function nature of mathematical integer factoring. Similarly, the symmetric key algorithm used in PGP version 2 was IDEA, which might at some point in the future be found to have previously undetected cryptanalytic flaws. Specific instances of current PGP or IDEA insecurities are not publicly known, as current versions of PGP have added additional encryption algorithms. The degree of their cryptographic vulnerability varies with the algorithm used. In practice, each of the algorithms in current use are not publicly known to have cryptanalytic weaknesses. New versions of PGP are released periodically and vulnerabilities are fixed by developers as they come to light. Any agency wanting to read PGP messages would probably use easier means than standard cryptanalysis, e.g., rubber hose cryptanalysis or black bag cryptanalysis, i.e., The FBI has already used this attack against PGP in its investigations. However, any such vulnerabilities apply not just to PGP but to any conventional encryption software. In 2003, an incident involving seized Scion PDAs belonging to members of the Red Brigade indicated that neither the Italian police nor the FBI were able to decrypt PGP encrypted files stored on them. A more recent incident in December 2006, involving U.S. Customs agents who seized a laptop PC that allegedly contained child pornography, indicates that U.S. government agencies find it nearly impossible to access PGP encrypted files. Additionally, a magistrate judge ruling on the case in November 2007 has stated that forcing the suspect to reveal his PGP passphrase would violate his Fifth Amendment rights, i.e., a suspect's constitutional right not to incriminate himself. Evidence suggests that as of 2007, British police investigators are unable to break PGP, so instead have resorted to using REPO legislation to demand the passwords, keys. In November 2009, a British citizen was convicted under REPO legislation and jailed for 9 months for refusing to provide police investigators with encryption keys to PGP encrypted files. History. Early history. Phil Zimmermann created the first version of PGP encryption in 1991. The name, Pretty Good Privacy, was inspired by the name of a grocery store, Ralph's Pretty Good Grocery, featured in radio host Garrison Keillor's fictional town, Lake Wobegon. This first version included a symmetric key algorithm that Zimmermann had designed himself, named Bassomatic after a Saturday Night Live sketch. Zimmermann had been a long-time anti-nuclear activist, and created PGP encryption so that similarly inclined people might securely use BBSs and securely store messages and files. No license was required for its non-commercial use. There was not even a nominal charge, and the complete source code was included with all copies. In a posting of June 5, 2001, entitled PGP Marks 10th Anniversary, Zimmermann describes the circumstances surrounding his release of PGP. It was on this day in 1991 that I sent the first release of PGP to a couple of my friends for uploading to the internet. First, I sent it to Alan Hocher, who posted it to PeaceNet, an ISP that specialized in grassroots political organizations, mainly in the peace movement. PeaceNet was accessible to political activists all over the world. Then, I uploaded it to Kelly Gurn, who proceeded to upload it to a Usenet newsgroup that specialized in distributing source code. At my request, he marked a Usenet posting as US only. Kelly also uploaded it to many BBS systems around the country. I don't recall if the postings to the internet began on June 5 or 6. It may be surprising to some that back in 1991, I did not yet know enough about Usenet newsgroups to realize that a US-only tag was merely an advisory tag that had little real effect on how Usenet propagated newsgroup postings. I thought it actually controlled how Usenet routed the posting. But back then, I had no clue how to post anything on a newsgroup, and didn't even have a clear idea what a newsgroup was. PGP found its way onto the internet, and it very rapidly acquired a considerable following around the world. Users and supporters included dissidents in totalitarian countries, civil libertarians in other parts of the world, and the free communications activists who called themselves cypherpunks, and decades later, Crypto Party, who did much the same via Twitter. Criminal investigation. Shortly after its release, PGP encryption found its way outside the United States, and in February 1993 Zimmermann became the formal target of a criminal investigation by the U.S. government for munitions export without a license. Crypto systems using keys larger than 40 bits were then considered munitions within the definition of the U.S. export regulations. PGP has never used keys smaller than 128 bits. so it qualified at that time. Penalties for violation, if found guilty, were substantial. After several years, the investigation of Zimmerman was closed without filing criminal charges against him or anyone else. Zimmerman challenged these regulations in an imaginative way. He published the entire source code of PGP in a hardback book, via MIT Press, which was distributed and sold widely. Anybody wishing to build their own copy of PGP could cut off the covers, separate the pages, and scan them using an OCR program, creating a set of source code text files. One could then build the application using the freely available GNU compiler collection. PGP would thus be available anywhere in the world. The claimed principle was simple. Export of munitions, guns, bombs, planes, and software was restricted, but the export of books is protected by the First Amendment. The question was never tested in court with respect to PGP. In cases addressing other encryption software, however, 2 federal appeals courts have established the rule that cryptographic software source code is speech protected by the First Amendment. U.S. export regulations regarding cryptography remain in force, but were liberalized substantially throughout the late 1990s. Since 2000, compliance with the regulations is also much easier. PGP encryption no longer meets the definition of a non-exportable weapon, and can be exported internationally except to 7 specific countries and a list of named groups and individuals. PGP3 and founding of PGP Inc. During this turmoil, Zimmerman's team worked on a new version of PGP encryption called PGP3. This new version was to have considerable security improvements, including a new certificate structure which fixed small security flaws in the PGP2X certificates, as well as permitting a certificate to include separate keys for signing and encryption. Furthermore, the experience with patent and export problems led them to eschew patents entirely. PGP3 introduced use of the CAST-128 symmetric key algorithm, and the DSA and El-Gamal asymmetric key algorithms, all of which were unencumbered by patents. After the federal criminal investigation ended in 1996, Zimmerman and his team started a company to produce new versions of PGP encryption. They merged with ViaCrypt, which then changed its name to PGP Incorporated. The newly combined ViaCrypt PGP team started work on new versions of PGP encryption based on the PGP3 system. Unlike PGP2, which was an exclusively command-line program, PGP3 was designed from the start as a software library allowing users to work from a command line or inside a GUI environment. The original agreement between ViaCrypt and the Zimmerman team had been that ViaCrypt would have even-numbered versions and Zimmerman odd-numbered versions. ViaCrypt thus created a new version that they called PGP4. To remove confusion about how it could be that PGP3 was the successor to PGP4, PGP3 was renamed and released as PGP5 in May 1997. Network Associates acquisition in December 1997, PGP Inc. was acquired by Network Associates, Inc. Zimmerman and the PGP team became NI employees. NI was the first company to have a legal export strategy by publishing source code. Under NI, the PGP team added disk encryption, desktop firewalls, intrusion detection, and IPsec VPNs to the PGP family. After the export regulation liberalizations of 2000, which no longer required publishing of source, NI stopped releasing source code. In early 2001, Zimmerman left NI. He served as chief cryptographer for Hush Communications, who provide an open PGP-based email service, Hushmail. He has also worked with Veridyes and other companies. In October 2001, NI announced that its PGP assets were for sale and that it was suspending further development of PGP encryption. The only remaining asset kept was the PGP business server. In February 2002, Nye cancelled all support for PGP products, with the exception of the renamed command line product. Nye continued to sell and support the product under the name McAfee Business Server until 2013. Current situation: in August 2002, several ex-PGP team members formed a new company, PGP Corporation, and bought the PGP assets from Nye. The new company was funded by Rob Weiss of Dole Capital Management and Terry Garnett of Venrock Associates. PGP Corporation supports existing PGP users and honors NAI's support contracts. Zimmerman now serves as a special advisor and consultant to PGP Corporation, as well as continuing to run his own consulting company. In 2003, PGP Corporation created a new server-based product called PGP Universal. In mid-2004, PGP Corporation shipped its own command line version called PGP Command Line, which integrates with the other PGP encryption platform applications. In 2005, PGP Corporation made its first acquisition, the German software company Gluck & Kanja Technology AG, which is now PGP Deutschland AG. In 2010, PGP Corporation acquired Hamburg-based certificate authority TC Trust Center and its parent company, Chosen Security, to form its PGP Trust Center division. Since the 2002 purchase of NAI's PGP assets, PGP Corporation has offered worldwide PGP technical support from its offices in Draper, Utah, Offenbach, Germany, and Tokyo, Japan. On April 29, 2010, Symantec Corp. announced that it would acquire PGP for $300 million with the intent of integrating it into its enterprise security group. This acquisition was finalized and announced to the public on June 7, 2010. The source code of PGP Desktop 10 is available for peer review. Also in 2010, Intel Corporation acquired McAfee. In 2013, the McAfee business server was transferred to Software Diversified Services, which now sells, supports, and develops it under the name SDSE Business Server.